All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for part 4 of our Facebook Live series, Poultry Cracked Open. Today, this episode will discuss a new rule that would require the industrialized poultry industry to disclose key information to farmers before they decide whether or not to enter into contracts that are often one-sided, exploitative, and require massive financial investments. My name is Julie Wilson. I am the comms manager for the socially responsible agriculture project, and I will be moderating today's event. While we're waiting for people to join, I'd like to go ahead and give a little bit of background about Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, also known as SRAP, and why advocating to protect farmers' rights is so important. So SRAP informs the public about the negative effects of industrial livestock operations while providing direct assistance to communities impacted by this destructive industry. Our team includes technical experts, independent family farmers, and rural residents who have faced the threats of incoming or expanding factory farms in their communities. We have a help hotline people can call for free assistance in facing an industrial livestock operation. If that's something that you or someone you know is interested in, you can visit our website at sraproject.org for more info. And we'll also put the phone number for our hotline in the chat here in a little bit. SRAP also has a contract grower transition program that works to transform rural communities by engaging contract growers struggling within the industrial ag system. So consolidation in the poultry sector allows agribusiness giants to manipulate the marketplace. This reduces farmers' earnings, making it difficult for them to make ends meet. This unchecked consolidation, where corporations control multiple stages of the process, the production process, has created an imbalance of power, which allows the industry to manipulate the marketplace, trap farmers in exploitive contracts, push down the prices paid to farmers and ranchers, and it drives independent producers out of business. So in this episode, 3 former contract poultry growers who now serve on SRAP's field operation team will discuss a newly proposed USDA rule that would require the industry to disclose that key information to farmers before they decide whether or not to enter into contracts that are often one-sided and require huge financial investments. So today we're going to dive deep into what this new rule means, how you can submit public comments, and discuss a survey RAFI compiled to submit anonymous comments to USDA in an effort to advocate for increased transparency and fairness protections in the poultry industry. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Craig, and we're going to go around and give our introductions. I think you're on mute, Craig.
I wish I had $1 for every time I heard that. I want to just mention also that in addition to the 3 contract growers, myself, Michael, and Susie, we have Aaron Johnson from RAFI that's going to be discussing this with us, and he's actually probably got his finger on the pulse of this thing, probably closer than anybody I can think of. So I'm looking forward to him hit his spiel here in just a few minutes. But I'm Craig Watts, and I'm down here in southeastern North Carolina. I started contract poultry growing in 1992, grew for 23 and a half years. Just became very disillusioned with the industry probably just a few years in. Spent a long time fighting it from the inside, and now in 2016 I exited and still advocating for farmers from the outside now. I started with SRAP as a contractor in 2016. I now serve as a field director for the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, and I also direct the contract grower transition program. And Aaron?
Yeah, my name's Aaron Johnson. I'm the Challenging Corporate Power Program Manager at the Rural Advancement Foundation International, USA. My program is focused on two goals. One is reversing corporate concentration in the food system, specifically in livestock industries, and two, to advocate for policies that would advantage or promote regionalized, climate smart livestock economies. And I'm happy to be here today to talk about what we can do to fight back against corporate power.
Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Diaz. I, along with Susie and Craig, part of SRAF's Grower Transition Program. We aim to engage contract growers who are struggling in the system. Most of us know it's a fairly easy industry to get into, but it's nearly impossible to escape. By providing some personal experience and insight about what it is to be a contract grower, hopefully we can get some growers who are looking to exit the system some guidance should they choose to leave the system. I am a former contract grower, grew for 3 different integrators. My wife and I quickly realized that the business model that was presented to us just wasn't a recipe for success. We chose to exit the system. It resulted in us losing our home and our farm. And you know, at this point, we're on the other side. Many of us that are in that type of situation are not as fortunate as we were to be able to start over. So looking at things from the advocacy side really gives us a push into trying to make some needed changes that this industry desperately needs. Susie.
Yes, I'm Susie Crutchfield. I'm from Arkansas. I started growing chickens in 1987. We shut off in 2012, and like Craig, it didn't take us too long after we made the decision to build poultry houses that we were very unsatisfied. Me and my husband has fought for the rules changes that is coming or trying to come in. We worked on the farm bill, the last farm bill, and this one to help all of the poultry growers out there be able to fight back against the large integrators and to give them at least a chance to have a legal representation for them if they get cut off like we did. And we also face they face the challenges every day of being shut off. It's not like, well, I've got a contract till 2011 and I'm 27 or something like that, and then I get shut off maybe. No, poultry growers out there today face getting shut off every day.
Thank you, Susie. If you happen to catch our previous episode, Susie actually wasn't here. She had COVID, but we discussed how the USDA had begun to work on 3 proposed rules to support enforcement of the Packers and Stockyards Act, PSA. This law was written over 100 years ago to protect poultry, swine, and cattle producers from unfair practices. So I got involved with this thing with the 2008 Farm Bill when they did the livestock title, and I just want to kind of give a brief accounting of the history of the Packers and Stockyards Act, and then I'm going to hand it over to Aaron. But in 1921, Congress passed the Packers and Stockyards Act in response to the market power the meat companies had. And in 1935, they included live poultry dealers. So you fast forward to the 1960s, and the CAFO model was really starting to take hold in American agriculture. And along that same line, companies were starting to vertically integrate, meaning they own every step of the process. And poultry they perfected it, but they owned every process but raising the birds. And that was no accident, because if they completely went totally integrated, it would probably take 2 or 3 employees to do what that farmer does on a daily basis, because poultry farming is a 24/7 job. And you guys that are growers, you know that. And another issue we're paying for now is these companies got so big over time, and which the farmers means the farmers have less options to sell to or to buy from, for that matter. And they tend to dominate a particular region. They are a monopsony. They're the single buyer in that region. And that consolidation, it gives these companies tremendous amount of power over farmers, and it leaves them stuck in this debt treadmill system, or worse, in some cases like Michael losing the farm. So it was in 2008 that the Congress required the USDA to respond to decades of complaints. So in 2010, the rules were published, just became known as the GIPSA rule, GIPSA being grain inspection packers and stockyards. And packers and stockyards had been merged with the enforcement arm of the USDA, which was GIPSA. There were several components of that rule, and they were actually pretty good, but immediately when they came out, the industry went on attack, and they had the comment period lengthened, and I think it was for 6 months. So that kind of let them assemble their troops and to advocate to have the laws removed. Some farmers were sharing with me that the service techs were coming out with a sign-on letter, getting them to sign a letter saying that they did not agree with the rules. And, behind the barn, they absolutely agree with the rules. And that was some undue pressure, which that's an issue in itself. But shortly after that happened, the rules didn't go away, but Congress started doing this thing called the GIPSA rider, where they didn't do away with the rules, but they didn't allow funding, which basically killed them. So this happened several times before John Oliver spotlighted the struggle. And that year, there was no GIPSA rider because he called them out and basically embarrassed them. And a lot of us had something to do with that show. The Rural Advancement Foundation International that Aaron worked for, certainly they were integral in that. So in 2016, the Farmer Fair Practice Rule was condensed down. It was a condensed down version of the original rule, but it was immediately killed by Sonny Perdue in 2017. So then they merged GIPSA with the AMS division, which is the Agriculture Marketing Service. The enforcement arm was now under part of the agency that promoted what they were supposed to be regulating. So that's a odd pairing. What survived was one long rule dealing with undue preference. It had 4 specific criteria that examined if a practice was fair or not. The 4th criteria was the one that was extremely troublesome. It was practices that are customary. Well, it's well documented that practices that are customary within the industry are the reasons that we went after these rules to start with. So here we are in 2022 with GIPSA Rule 2.0. We got a second chance. I personally prefer the government to be the court of last resort, but I know poultry farmers basically are in the court of last resort. When I read stuff like on the Chicken Council website where they talk about how great the tournament system is, and they say stuff like all farmers start out with equal quality chicks and feed, and folks just on there, it just drives me bananas and it gives me my juice. A dog can have 5 puppies and they're not genetically identical. How in the world can 2 million chicks be genetically identical? And that's the only way the tournament system will work, if all the inputs were equal, but that's logistically impossible. So, I'm gonna just, so we're here in 2022, and the rule came out in June, and the comment period, I think, is over in August, but I'm gonna let Aaron just kind of take it from here and he can explain all the how-tos and the nitty-gritty. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks, Craig. That's great to hear all of y'all. The history that Craig is describing, Rafi was there every step of the way. Rafi's been involved with this work for over 30 years and has been involved with advocacy around rulemaking with Pack and Stockyards Act for that entire time. Before I dive into this rule, I just want to set a little context of what the rulemaking process is, so that everyone understands that. The Packers and Stockyards Act was a law that was passed in the 1920s. And it's, in some ways, a really impressive and strong antitrust law designed to hold meat packers accountable. And it really affords the government a lot of power, a lot more power than it's currently using, to regulate the fairness and resilience of our food system. And part of what the law does is it delegates authority to the USDA and the executive branch to interpret the Packers and Stockyards Act's provisions forward into the future, so that, it's not the 1920s anymore. We farm differently than we did in the 1920s, and the government needs to keep up with how things change in the industry and continue to enforce fairness. And the USDA has a decent amount of leeway to continue to interpret the general spirit of the Packers and Stockyards Act as new issues in the industry arise. And that's what the rulemaking process is. And when a rule by the USDA is fully finalized, that actually amends and changes and gets recorded in US code and becomes part of the law. So it's a powerful process. The ways that process can be challenged, like Craig said, is one, before a rule is finalized, Congress has some levers they can pull to slow down, restrict, or halt a rulemaking process. And two, people in the industry or anyone can sue and try to take their case as far as it can go, up to including the Supreme Court, to try to strike down a rulemaking process. That's the other kind of risk to that process. So just wanted people to understand that, like, what we're talking about is live animals to some extent here. Like, if finalized, this would become a part of U.S. law, and USDA has the power to do that, to basically make additions to the text of the Packers and Stockyards Act as law, to update it for what we need in the 21st century, and that's what we need. We need some updates. So, what does this law do, or what does this rule do? Well, it's 155 pages long, and I'm here to explain it, so you don't have to read that. So the rule that USDA has issued, its first of three that they tell us they're issuing, is called the Transparency in Poultry Growing Contracts and Tournaments rule. So just so people one more piece of context is that this is the first of three rules that are going to come out. So this isn't the only effort to improve fairness in the food system. There will be at least two more rules coming out after this. But let's talk about what this one does. I think many of us who've been in this fight for a long time have been advocating for a long time, specifically that the tournament system be banned as an unfair practice or an undue preference. That tournament system isn't the only issue in the poultry industry. There's a lot of issues in the poultry industry around how, different provisions in contracts. And this rule it makes incremental improvements and does not come out and ban the tournament system. So I kind of want to explain, it's helpful, I think, to think about the rule as if it were an argument with then a proposed solution. And there are certain things that the rule is addressing and other issues that the rule is not addressing. The core issue that this rule identifies as a problem it's trying to solve is a disparity of information between contract growers and poultry corporations. Poultry corporations operate nationally. They have a lot of information. They have very expensive data technology to analyze all of that information. They know the types of contracts they're offering to people all across the country. They know what they can get away with. They know where they have comparatively more or less market power, where they have competition. You as a grower do not have access to nearly the amount of information that a poultry corporation does. And that's the fundamental issue that USDA kind of isolates and says, we want to address this issue. What information gaps are there between contract growers and poultry corporations, and how can we even that playing field? And the kind of technical term for that for them is information asymmetry. And there are a couple of different examples of this that they cite. One is around what you know about what's actually guaranteed in your contract. I've talked to so many growers who, I'll ask them, like, how many flocks per year were you guaranteed? And they'll be like, oh, well, 5. I was like, but was that in your contract? Well, no, it was kind of like a handshake agreement. But so did they come later and say, now we're not going to send you 5 flocks a year? Yeah. And when you protested that, what'd they say? They said, where is it in the contract that we guarantee you 5 flocks a year, right? But fundamentally, what's at issue there is when you're signing that contract, that the other party you're signing a contract with there, the corporation, has a lot more leeway about changing the expectations about what you're actually guaranteed in that contract than you do. That's a problem. For contracts to work, there actually needs to be shared expectations about what the contract is guaranteeing. Second, like Craig talked about, there are a lot of inputs that are being provided by the corporation. They own the birds, they own the feed, they own the medication. All of those inputs are of varying quality. And the information about the quality of those inputs is not currently disclosed to growers, or at least not required to be disclosed to growers. And that's a problem because all that affects your tournament system performance. And so if you don't know comparatively the quality of your inputs compared to the quality of other growers who you are in competition with in the tournament system, you have no way of knowing whether you are actually on an even playing field within their tournament system, or whether you are being artificially disadvantaged because you're being provided with inputs that are of different quality than those who you are competing with. And if that's the case, that's not in your control and you shouldn't be penalized for it. And finally, like coming into a poultry contract, a lot of people don't realize the amount of income variability that actually exists in this industry for growers. And part of that is because of the tournament system. Part of that is because integrators have pretty unilateral control over take it or leave it. What's your base pay, right? They can come out to you and say, well, we're going to ask you to sign an updated contract and we're cutting your base pay. And what other choice do you have? Like what other integrator are you going to go to? That's very common. So that kind of income variability is also something that not a lot of growers, many growers are not aware of that dynamic coming into the industry, and kind of catches them by surprise later. So these are some examples that USDA kind of cites, some of RAFI's research, some of other organizations' research as part of the problem they're trying to address. And so then fundamentally what they are trying to do, well, let me just say, you may have noticed one of the problems that is not being addressed is just the existence of the tournament system. This rule isn't getting rid of the tournament system because that's kind of outside the scope of what is the core problem they're addressing with this rule: transparency and equal information between growers and integrators in terms of information you need to know whether you are entering into an equitable contract and are receiving equitable inputs. We'll come back and talk later about what do we do about the fact that this is only addressing some problems and not others. So how is it addressing the problems that it does identify? The rule, if finalized, would require integrators to provide more transparent disclosures to growers at several different parts of the process of being a contract grower. First, kind of the first bucket of disclosures is when you are either signing a new contract as a first-time grower, or renewing your contract, or changing your contract because you're taking out a new loan to upgrade some of your facilities. Basically, anytime your contract is changing, you have to sign a new contract. At that point, they're going to need to provide you with a disclosure document or set of documents that tells you a number of things. They're going to tell you what is the minimum number of flocks that our contract guarantees and at what stocking density. Now, importantly, they could say we guarantee 0, but at least they are contractually held at that point to whatever they guarantee. And we hope to advocate then on the backside of this, well, if the guarantee is 0, then lenders should reconsider whether they're going to lend to a contract like that, because there's actually no guaranteed income there. So they're going to have to make explicit what is kind of the floor that we're guaranteeing in terms of number of flock placements and stock density. They are also going to have to disclose whether they've been involved with any litigation with any of their contract growers over the past 6 years, and summarize the resolution to any of those litigation situations. They'll have to disclose if they have any policies around whether you can sell your farm. Some integrators have policies that sneak up on folks if they want to sell their farm later on in the contract, so they have to disclose that up front. They have to disclose if any of their, they will have to disclose kind of a data breakdown of the average income of their growers that are supplying the same processing facility that you will potentially be supplying. So that income breakdown should tell you, let's say you're going to be supplying a processing facility 30 miles away. For all the growers supplying that processing facility, what is a breakdown of like the common barn specification? So it'll be kind of like a categorization of that. And then by quintile. So for every grower that has a medium quality barn, what percentage of those growers are in the 0 to 20% income quintile, and what is the average income in that quintile? And then the same for 20 to 40%, 40 to 60%, and so on. So that you should be able to see, well, dang, at this processing facility for folks with kind of average quality barns, it turns out that 65% of the growers are in the bottom 2 income quintiles, and they're making less than I need to make to actually make it in this business. And wouldn't you know it, only 5% of the growers are in the top 20%. So this is kind of skewed, and I might want to reconsider whether I want to sign this contract or not. The intent of that portion of the disclosure is basically to give you like real data, a real data snapshot of the income variability of growers in your area, based on the quality of barn infrastructure that they have, to give you a better idea of like how are real growers in my area doing right now with this integrator, with the type of barn specification I'm considering buying or building. That is potentially directly in response to, or that particular requirement is directly in response to some research that we worked on and shared with USDA around deceptive income and earning claims that poultry companies will provide to prospective growers in the recruitment process, which is an issue that we've identified in the past. So they'll also need to disclose any information they collect on variable costs for growers. There's a few other things. So this first bucket is basically information intended to give you a better picture of what you're getting into if you're signing a contract with an integrator, more information with which you can make a decision about whether it's actually going to pencil out and work for you, and more information on whether it's working for other people in your area. The second set of disclosures focuses really heavily on the quality of inputs you're receiving, and that will come in at two different points. First, anytime you receive a new flock from your integrator, you, if this rule were finalized, should receive within 24 hours a disclosure document that tells you any health information about that particular flock. Like, did this flock of chicks have a health issue before it got to you? The breed information, the ratio of the gender of the chicks, a ID number for the breeder facility that they came from, the age of the breeder flock that hatched those chicks, because there's research out there that affects the efficiency with which they grow and thus your tournament system performance. And there may be a few other variables that I'm forgetting, but a bunch of variables about the flock of chicks you just received. Then, let's say you grow that flock out for the entirety of its life cycle and send it back to the processing facility, and you receive your settlement sheet after going to the tournament system. You should again receive all the information about the quality of your own inputs, and also in an anonymized table, so you don't actually know the identities, all of that same input quality information for each and every other grower who was in the same tournament group as you, so that you can compare. I was in the bottom third of my tournament group this time, and it looks like a bunch of the other folks in my tournament group had better flock qualities than I did. You will also get like the facility specification data on everyone who you were competing with. You will also get a disclosure in that settlement sheet of any feed discrepancies over 12 hours that you experienced that would have impacted the efficiency with which your flock grew during that time period. So the intention of this settlement sheet disclosure is that it is severalfold. One, that you be able to have a clearer picture of to what degree the inputs that you're receiving are advantaging or disadvantaging your tournament system performance. Two, that you basically have a paper trail of more information with which you could potentially prove that you are being disadvantaged in a discriminatory way or being retaliated against, etc. That you could then take and go to the farmerfairness.org portal that USDA and DOJ have set up and make your case that there's a violation of the Stockyards Act going on in your case. You should have more receipts, basically. Importantly, though, again, there's not here a requirement that their tournament system actually equalize for these discrepancies. You could imagine a system in which you receive a poor quality flock and the mathematical formula that calculates where you place in the tournament system would in some way mathematically compensate for and equalize the quality of your flock compared to those who you are competing with. That's not a requirement in this rule. It's just a requirement that they tell you the truth about how well or poorly they're treating you, if that makes sense. So that's the second bucket of disclosures. Overall, then, what this rule is addressing is it's giving you more information about the quality of your contract and the quality of your inputs and how that may advantage or disadvantage you. There's some key things that this rule is not addressing, so I just want to highlight them and acknowledge them. One is they may still offer contracts that don't actually have enough flock placements or stocking densities to cash flow. They're not required. There's not like a floor on the amount of flocks that they have to guarantee in policy in this rule. They are required to disclose input quality variables and feed discrepancies, but they're not required to create tournament formulas that compensate for that. This rule also doesn't deal with tournament group composition effects, which is a long way of saying, let's say the last 3 times you went through the tournament system, you went through the tournament system with the same growers, and then this time you got placed with a bunch of new growers who have like way better barns than you. And let's say you used to be in a tournament group with 15 growers, and now you're in a tournament group with just 4 growers. And so all of a sudden the averages work a lot worse in your favor. That's not on you. Like, you don't have any control over the group of other growers that you're grouped with in your tournament system, right? This rule isn't really addressing that issue or fixing that issue at all. So that's still a problem in terms of how payment works in the poultry industry. And more broadly, this rule is not addressing like the core regional monopsony issue of there are just so many places around the country where there's only 1 or 2 growers that you can contract with, and so they can just dictate whatever price they want to you or bad contract terms. Like, again, this is making them tell you the truth about more things, but it's not actually like changing the structure of the system or forcing them to behave differently. It's just forcing them to tell you the truth about how you're behaving more than they used to be able to. We do think there's some positive effects though. So some of the positive effects that this rule could have is, like I said earlier, you're going to be in a better position to evaluate whether entering into a contract with a particular integrator is a wise decision. You're going to have more information about how they're treating their other growers, whether they've had a bunch of lawsuits from other growers in the past. And you will have a better idea of the extent to which you will be able to cash flow in relation to the loans you're considering taking out. And by requiring all these disclosures about input quality, you should have more information to make a case if you think you're being discriminated against, and we in general will have more information about the degree to which those inputs are of different quality just in our work going forward. So this information that we'll be getting is information we didn't have in the past, and so that does lay a foundation for us to continue to advocate for further reforms based on what we start to learn from growers as they receive this information. Now, there are some ways that we could improve this rule. So I'll highlight some of those briefly. And the other thing that I'll highlight is that alongside the rule itself, USDA also put out a separate comment period asking a bunch of questions about other things they could do to address unfair practices in the industry, which indicates to us that just because they're not, limiting the tournament system in this rule doesn't mean they wouldn't consider doing that or addressing other unfair practices in either of the following 2 rules that we expect to come. So there's more bites of the apple here, which means we're both thinking about ways to substantively improve this rule and also about suggestions for other things they should do in future rules to address other unfair practices. So some things that could be improved. One, we think that integrators should actually have to disclose like the maximum amount that your income could vary in the tournament system. So right now you really don't know, like there's no kind of disclosed like floor or ceiling on how poorly or well you could do in the tournament system. Functionally, what I would like this rule to do is say up front when you're negotiating your contract, let's say the base pay is 4 cents a pound. The worst you could do is 50% of that, and the best you could do is 120% of that, or whatever. Like, I think that they should have to tell you what is the worst possible outcome in our tournament system formula for you. And part of that is functionally then requiring them to kind of set a floor and a ceiling on how much the tournament system can vary your income. I think that fits within the parameters of what they're doing here, of like being transparent about how poorly or well you could do in the tournament system formula. I think they should also have to more prominently disclose, given that, what the minimum cash flow is on a contract. Like, if we're only guaranteeing 2 flocks a year, and if the worst you could do is 60% below base pay, then really the amount of money you are guaranteed annually is X poor amount of money. I think that it should be prominently disclosed, like what's the worst you could do in a given year, given the parameters that we've disclosed, because then that would give you a very clear picture of like what's the range of cash flow you can actually expect from this contract. We have a better picture of the cash flow with the like flock placement and density disclosures, but we still don't have the full picture unless we also know how much your income could vary in the actual formula of their tournament system. So I think that's like would be an important addition that would give you an even clearer picture of your cash flow picture. Within the flock delivery disclosures, we think that they should disclose even more information about the like the historical performance of flocks from the layer flock that hatched your flock. Basically, you'd be able to request historical data on flock performance from the layer facility and layer flock that your flock came from, and that you'd be able to request that data for the flocks of your competitors as well. That would give you an even fuller picture of, you know, the quality of inputs that you're being provided. So we think that that's something that could be done. We think that when a contract is being provided, they should have to really clearly spell out, here are all the inputs that we control, and here's the data we currently have about how much the quality of those inputs could vary, and here is what our tournament formula does to compensate for that, if anything. We also think that there needs to be a more robust appeals process, clearly kind of guaranteed in contracts for feed issues, or like for growers who are on the ground actually observing problems, like to be able to like have a formal way of making an appeal to their integrator that they had an issue, and then receive a report back in their disclosure that outlines a summary of how the integrator tried to address that issue. That would just add even more context to the receipts that you're piling up if you think that you're having an issue with your integrator. Because honestly, part of what the tournament system does is it pushes out onto growers a lot of like mundane costs that that are still affecting their tournament system performance. If the feed truck shows up to your farm and doesn't empty out all of the grain in the trailer and drives away, like you're short that much feed, and the company doesn't know that, but you may have seen that. How does that get factored in, right? So I think there needs to be more appeals processes required for growers. So that's another thing that we would suggest. So we have a few other suggestions. We're putting a blog in the comments where you can read an article version of everything that I've kind of outlined here. The other really important thing that you can do to engage with this process, there's two. One, we've created an anonymous survey because we know that a lot of growers have concerns about privacy and potential retaliation if they are thinking about using their voice to speak up about these issues. So we've created this anonymous survey where you can provide your stories and feedback about this rule, about other improvements that need to be made, and about issues you've seen in your time in the industry to us anonymously. We'll gather all of that feedback together and group that in our comment to USDA without your name or any identifying information being included. That gives you kind of a barrier of privacy while still being able to get your story into our comment. You can also make a comment yourself, and so they'll be putting links in the comments here to the two different places in the Federal Register where you can actually just go on and write your own comment. The thing to know there is that is a part of the federal record, and your name and identifying information is attached to that, and can be obtained through FOIA. So if you're comfortable with that, then please do go ahead and also tell your own story. Or if you're a former grower and don't have privacy concerns or retaliation concerns anymore, definitely go and do
that. Okay. Wow, Aaron, that's a lot of information, a lot of good information. I'm liking all these disclosures because I can remember when you would say, well, my flock didn't do well, and you would get an explanation, something like, well, you had one flickering light bulb in your house, so that caused your flock to do bad. Or maybe your grass wasn't cut just right or something. And I'm not making this stuff up. I wish I was. So kudos to the USDA for at least getting us this far. So, but I'd like to hear some real world experiences What I'd like to do is ask Michael and Susie if they would have, if this transparency rule had been in place, would it have benefited them prior to signing the contract or any time that they were contracted raising poultry. So Michael, what about it? Would that have benefited you any in place if it been in place prior to you signing that contract?
Well, Craig, I'll say, had this been in place prior to me signing a contract, I probably wouldn't be on this call right now. I would absolutely have put on the brakes. However, I will say that would rely entirely on the inputs being put in. Like, is all the information they're giving you prior to signing, is it accurate? Is it truthful? And if so, then I'll repeat, we would have never signed that contract. Another thing that, that leads me to say, and I know this is something that I'm going to put in my public comment is, who's policing this stuff? Who's the watchdog on what the inputs the integrators are using, so that I can make it, a healthy financial decision entirely based on facts, not just theory or some numbers that they're pulling out of the air. And my other question is, I heard Aaron say that we'd have the opportunity to look at those inputs. So, where does that leave me if I'm looking at, the history of the breeder flock and at the end of the day, I'm gauging, wait a minute, I didn't fare well in this tournament. What then? Okay, what does that mean as far as my my final dollar? What does that mean? What's my defense, and what course of action do I take once I realize that, okay, my inputs weren't as good as the next guy down the road, so that put me at a disadvantage. So how are they going to make up for that? So there's just some things that I anticipate adding into that public comment. The next thing he asked, I think it was during the time we were raising birds, would it have affected me? And absolutely, it'd give us an extra set of tools to gauge performance. However, again, sadly, I'm going to say that word, however. I hate using it constantly, but I would like to have even more transparency on the performance history of the farms that are feeding our farm. Give me more data. What are those breeder flocks? What are the performance history? I know Aaron mentioned, we know how old they were and the sex ratio on the birds. But traditionally, how did those farms, when they placed those birds, how did they perform on the broiler houses that they were stored in? With the tournament system comes a whole set of intricacies that unfortunately are out of our control, and that leaves the success of each flock to chance. And that those were the things that really put the nail in our coffin, was raising birds by chance.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. That's some good insight. So Susie, you had the most experience out of all of us. I think you said you started raising birds in 1987. If this rule had been in place before you signed your contract, would it have affected you?
Yes, it would have. It would have given us a clearer view of what we were getting into. And the little speech that they give you when they are trying to recruit you, that tells about their program, how clean their hatcheries are, what kind of feed, you get the best feed, you get all this, would have, if they'd been transparent about it, you would have been able to see that the difference in the chicks, the difference in the feed that you get, the difference in how far that they have to travel from farm to farm makes the difference in which growers does better, because if you're 40 miles away from the hatchery, or if you're 10 miles away from the hatchery, you know, that does make a difference. But also, their ability to promote their program and of recruiting would be not as if they had to show all of these different areas of their disclosure, then you would have a lot better view of what they were selling than what they present to you.
So you may have already talked about it. What about the disclosures while you were raising birds? That'd help?
Yeah, the disclosures I'm talking about on raising birds would be, disclose to me why you think I need to update. Show me the data that it is of what chickens is growing better. Show me the data of what kind of equipment is growing better for you to give me these updates and force me into these updates.
Right.
Stuff like that is not give to us. It's just, they just tell you to update, or they just tell you you're going to get these birds. If they have to disclose this, then you would be able to know how to prepare your farm to raise chickens better, or be able to go, why do I need these updates? And are these cost efficient updates for us, or is it for you? You know, and this is something they don't disclose, is especially on the updates, is they
Yep.
do not give you the data to show where it helps you. It's that it is to help them, not you.
So
There's never been a cost benefit analysis to my knowledge that comes with the upgrade demand. You know, it's throwing mud against the wall. And if something sticks,
Yes.
the farmer paid for it. If it doesn't, the farmer paid for it.
Yeah, Susie, what you just said, hit home. I remember having 700, CFMs, and their requirement was I needed to get to 800. Well, just to get to 800 required me to do some substantial upgrades. And if I was to say, okay, show me a test farm where that 800 CFMs on a facility that's similar to mine is generating more cash flow from my facility, then that transparency right there would make sense. I'm happy to see progress, Craig. Don't get me wrong. It's just, I'm hoping that this is just a catalyst to a lot more progress forthcoming.
Sure. Yeah, that's what we're all hoping. We're getting short on time here. Julie, do you want to go into Q&A now?
I think Aaron might have had something that he wanted to add, but if not,
Okay, sure.
there was a couple of questions in that set of commentary there that I'll just quick bullet point to. One, to what Susie was saying about like being able to see data around how people are performing in barns. I think there might be a dynamic to these transparency disclosures that does give you a little bit more of a window to that, because in your settlement sheet, you're going to be able to see like if growers with a higher barn specification than you are constantly performing better in the tournament system than you, like you will be seeing that trend in the disclosures that you're getting. So to some extent, there might be a little bit to which there's a dynamic that you'll be able to see whether folks with better barns are actually performing better or not. It's not the full picture, but it's kind of what you're talking about. And to what Michael was asking about, like, well, we have all this information, but what can we do with it now? I think the main answer so far is take it to the Packers and Stockyards division on their new portal. You'll have a lot more documentation of things you think are going wrong. That being said, we don't know what's coming out in the next two rules. This may also give Packers and Stockyards themselves more ammunition to go on their own investigative hunts for unfair practices without you having to report. So
okay. Well, anyone that's tuning in, if you do have any questions for us, feel free to throw those in the chat and we will address them to the best of our ability. But one of the first questions we have is even if this rule is approved, why should we, being contract poultry growers, excited about it when it doesn't feel like the Packers and Stockyards Act division is doing much to help us?
So here's what I would say. I hear this sentiment a decent amount of like, we don't see the Packers and Stockyards division out really investigating the true issues in the industry. And I think one of the things that we need to realize about this is like the Packers and Stockyards Act, or the Packers and Stockyards division, is an agency of people that are able to enforce the law to whatever extent we give them the resources and capacity to do so. And there's a history over several decades of under-resourcing, under or defunding the enforcement of the Packers and Stockyards division to give integrators and the industry more leeway to abuse their corporate power. If we care about the rules that we are fighting for actually being enforced, we will all need to think more critically about the overall narrative in our society that all regulations are bad and all funding for enforcement of regulations is wasted money. Because ultimately, if we want the rules to be enforced, we need to attract talented, dedicated people and pay them and give them the resources and the infrastructure to go out and kick ass at enforcing rules for us. And until we do, and as long as there are forces opposing fully resourcing the enforcement of the law in terms of how corporations can abuse their power, we will not see the kind of results we want. So the rules are good. The other piece that will be vital is seeing Congress fully support and fully fund the enforcement of the rules, however they turn out. So that's what I would say to that concern.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. That makes a lot of sense. Another question we have is sometimes people wonder or are confused about why it's important to advocate for farmers who are raising animals in the industrial ag system, which we know is a system that's not healthy for people, the planet, or the animals involved. So why is it so important that we advocate for these farmers?
I'll take that one, and that's a fair question and a very good question, actually. I think over the last few years, with the folks that I have worked with, I have found out that what we all need to sit down and do is identify the enemy. Is the enemy the farmer? No. Is the enemy the animal rights folks? No. Is the enemy the environmentalists? No. USDA? No. EPA? No. What has broken the backs of the farmers is these poultry companies. So when we talk about supporting farmers, we're not necessarily supporting the industry. We're saying give them the right to exist, and let's move this mountain one little stone at a time so we can turn it into a better food system, a more equitable food system, a more healthy food system. And because I've been fighting this thing for 15 years and a better part of a decade on the inside out, and I risk everything I own because I think there's a better way. I bet my farm, so to speak, that there's a better way. And I did that knowing that the farmers alone can't do it. It's going to take the farmers, the consumers, the environmentalists, the animal folks. It's going to take the village, because what we're fighting here, the juggernaut, and it's taken 6 decades or so to get here. We're not going to fix it tomorrow, but like I said, they say that the most successful people that move mountains is one stone at a time, but we still have to do that together. Will we split down the road sometime in the future? Probably, but we're not there yet. Let's worry about getting to that point, and let's just all come together and let's fight this enemy. Thank you. Thanks,
Craig. That was a great answer, by the way. We have one final question from the comments. Alan would like to know, what about unfair incentives for growers to build new and not rewarding existing growers added pay to improve older barns?
So I'm going to plug our survey. This is an issue that I would love to hear more about.
Yeah.
So give us more context. Give us stories about this dynamic. But what I'll say is I don't think that this rule as it's currently written addresses this concern. It wouldn't do anything to limit integrators' activity around incentivizing new prospective growers over. We care about the rules that we are fighting for. Actually, sorry, there was an interference there. Versus incentivizing existing growers to improve their infrastructure. I think part of this concern could become relevant in terms of future rulemaking this year around unfair practices. So that's why I want more context in terms of policies that integrators pursue and that might constitute an undue preference towards certain growers and not others. So I think that I'm not saying that this isn't a live issue that couldn't be addressed with the Packers and Stockyards Act rulemaking process. I think I want to hear more about it. I don't think this current rule addresses it, but that doesn't mean that future rules couldn't. So would there be more transparency in regards to incentives? Oh, that's a good question. No, not that I can think of. So yeah, please go fill out our survey. Tell us more about this issue and how you think, what kind of transparency you think would be helpful, and we'll definitely try to include in our comment. I'll also just say about to piggyback on what Craig was saying, to someone who asks why should we be in solidarity with this type of farmer, my question back would be, what's your power building strategy? We are in a political environment where rural places have outsized power and are also being depopulated and extracted from. We need to build coalitions with folks who may not share all of our interests, but do share our core enemies. Our core enemy is corporate power that is unchecked and unregulated and not accountable to people. Corporations are fundamentally just as political as any other institution in our society, and they're using their political power for their own ends. We need to build solidarity with a coalition of folks who share our goals and work together. And that sometimes means that we take up the causes of other folks in our coalition even if they don't completely overlap with ours. So that's why I think this issue is important, not only for folks who are actually contract growers, but for all of us who want a better food system.
I got to jump in on this comment question about the unfair incentives for growers to build new houses. That is something I think, Aaron, that certainly needs to be addressed. I thought about that many a times. Why these guys? I had older barns. I was doing the exact same job. I was putting the exact same bird on the exact same trucks that were going to the exact same plants. Why would somebody get $250,000 just to build a new house and me get nothing? I mean, what you make should not be contingent on how high your bank payment is. So I think it really needs that's a great question. I'm done, Julie.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all, for answering those important questions. I think that really wraps us up for today. We're going to close and we're going to have a few comments here from Michael. And if you're ready, Michael.
Oh, all right. Craig, I'm going to say for every new house you see being built, there's an old house getting ready to go out the door. On a final note, you can find more information about the rule. Submit comments at the link that is in the chat. I believe, Julie, I'm right that link is in the chat. That comment period closes August the 8th. So please, most of us don't forget to go vote. This is just as important if we're looking to make some changes, or we're doing this for farmers. So please go out there and make your voice heard. In addition to the proposed rule, the USDA has published an advance notice of proposed rulemaking titled Poultry Grower Tournaments, Fairness and Related Concerns. And that link is also going to be provided in the chat. And just be sure to know that comment period closes on September 6th. So we have the first one closes on the 8th. Next one closes on September 6th. That's August the 8th and September 6th. And lastly, if you're a contract grower and you're in need of some type of assistance, please contact us at the link in the chat. That is shrapproject.org/contact.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. All of those links should be in the comments, and this video will be available both under the live tab on our Facebook page as well as our website. So if you haven't yet sign up for our newsletter, you can do that by going to our website. Like we said, it's sraproject.org. If you sign up for that newsletter, you can stay up to date with everything that we're working on, plus updates on this issue in particular, as well as a link to this series. This is our final episode of Poultry Cracked Open. So we hope that everyone enjoyed the series and that you had a few takeaways from that. And we just really appreciate your support and people tuning in. So with that, everybody have a great evening. Thanks, Craig, Susie, Aaron, and Michael. Appreciate y'all.
All right.
And that's it. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank y'all.